What you know about rolling down in the deep? When your brain goes numb, you can call a mental freeze. When these people talk too much, put that shit in slow motion. Yeah, I feel like an astronaut in the ocean. What you know about rolling down in the deep? When your brain goes numb, you can call a mental freeze. When these people talk too much, put that shit in slow motion. Yeah, I feel like an astronaut. She says that I'm cool. I'm like, yeah, that's true. I believe in G.O.D. Don't believe in T.H.O.D. She keep playing me down. I'ma play her for fun. You don't really know my mental. Let me give you the picture last dance.
This is John Cullen. Welcome to another episode of Webb of Deception. I'm joined once again in episode number 24 by Jason Goodman. Jason, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for doing this, John. This is going to be an interesting episode for people because this is arguably the first episode that crosses over from stuff that was just totally centered around me and what George and his gaggle of idiots were attempting to do to me, and crosses over into the story that you have primarily been reporting on, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the first time that there was that overlap, I guess, was the Joe Napoli part, because Joe Napoli and I started to, interact a bit, and he was trying to engage me somewhat. But this was really the first time that George Webb waded into what ends up becoming what I would consider my end of the pool.
Right.
Now, at the time, though, I don't think it really was. I mean, you and I were talking about this offline between shows about when did he really start talking about this Wuhan military games. There might be people watching right now who are like, what the hell are the Wuhan military games? What is that? I didn't even know about that. So what is that thing? So we're going to have to define that and show that to people so they understand what that is. And then what the hell does George Webb have to do with the Wuhan military games? And why would he even be bringing that up when he brought it up? And so this is where exactly this world of the George Webb weird stuff starts, dipping a toe into this, root cause of COVID thing. And so it seemed like this was really going to be a very interesting topic. I think similar to something like we've talked about before, where you felt like maybe you meeting George Webb wasn't really that much of an accident.
Right.
Getting me to report on the Wuhan military games may not have been an accident. All right, so we're going to explore that because I found out about the Wuhan military games from word of mouth and then started to explore it. Certainly I don't watch George Webb stuff, right? So I didn't watch anything he did. But somebody, somewhere, sent me something and said, you should check out this Wuhan military game thing. Probably sent me a link to Wikipedia, right? And just from the Wikipedia link, I was like, what the hell? This is a little bit weird and
What do you mean, Wikipedia? They already had a Wikipedia link about it?
Oh, dude, the Wikipedia, because the Wuhan military games is a thing. It's a thing. And so there's a whole Wikipedia page about
just the fact that they're right. I thought you meant about George's thing coming out of it. Right. No, it's been going on for a while, right?
So, the event, right. And who won this event, who won that event.
Let's take a step back for a minute, because you raised an excellent point. The military games in and of themselves, the 2019 military games, also known as the 7th CISM, Military World Games. So obviously since around 2012, China, in what I presume would ostensibly be some sort of diplomatic effort to have peace with other nations where the military are engaged in sports rather than killing each other, they've created this sort of equivalent of the Olympics, but you have to be in the army to be, or some military thing from all these different countries to be in it. So that's the general background of this. But for people who totally don't know about this story, at some point, it looks like this article here from the Army Times, which came out April 28th, 2020. This is saying conspiracies falsely accuse an Army reservist of being patient zero of the coronavirus pandemic. So sometime prior to April 28th, 2020, Mattia Benassi is accused, without any valid evidence, by George Webb of being this patient zero. Now let's see if this article actually mentions, it does. It says Benassi, who was featured by DOD Media after the race, was singled out as a potential patient zero for the virus in a YouTube video posted this March by George Webb, a man known for pushing conspiracies to his 98,000 subscribers. The allegations eventually spread to Global Times, an offshoot of People's Daily. So George put this out there, and this says it's a media organ of the Communist Party. And basically, Chinese news scooped up his reporting and was like, oh, look at this. Here's an American guy who says that an American was patient zero, but he had no evidence. And then the thing that makes it super duper crazy and brings it into the web of deception lane, as it were. That's interesting. Why do we have, oh, there we go. Yeah, the thing that brings it into the web of deception lane, John, is that we have this leprechaun idiot once again reporting on George's stupid shenanigans. His teeth look like they're going to fall out if he doesn't take better care of them. Fat little, smoking booze hound that he is. This is Donnie O'Sullivan, a fucking piece of shit who works for CNN and is busily trying to win an Emmy, but he always seems to be at the center of every George Webb story. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people will see a fat little drunk jackass like Donnie O'Sullivan and say, oh, he's against George Webb. Like, I was just having a little Twitter communication with somebody I don't know about something totally unrelated to this, where they're saying, oh, Elon Musk, all the Democrats, they're against Elon Musk, so I'm with him. He's trying to make Twitter all good for free speech. And I'm just saying, wait a minute now. You better be careful, because one of the number one ways, in my opinion, that I've observed, other people might look at similar evidence and come to a different conclusion, but in my opinion, one of the key tactics that are utilized by members of this web of deception is to create false alliances in the way that George attempted to present himself as my friend, an ally, an associate in making YouTube videos. And they also present false enemies so that you don't really know who is aligned and who isn't.
And we talked about the George Webb, Bob Malone dust up, which may or may not be real. No, absolutely. So let's
wait,
take
don't
some
move off of that yet, because Bob Malone, remember, when he's cornered by me on a phone call about being a jerk to you, he says, oh, well, look, even Bobby Kennedy in his new book, he says the Wuhan games. So Bobby Kennedy, everybody knows Bobby Kennedy is a genius who never says or does anything wrong and never gets anything incorrect, and is definitely not a captured asset who's hanging out with Mossad apparatchiks like Alan Dershowitz and that filthy dirtbag Shmuley Botak.
So is Bobby Kennedy reading or watching George Webb? How did he connect the Wuhan games? Well, we're going to take a look at this. So one of the things we're going to explore in this show is the Wuhan military games came up in congressional testimony. So Mike McCall brings it up in Congress. And also testifying is Brett Giroir and Dr. Stephen Quay. Now, I communicate with Dr. Stephen Quay. In fact, Stephen Quay just testified last week in front of Congress and sent me a DM like the next day.
Wow.
And
nice.
so he and I are interacting right now. He's the CEO. He's the CEO of Atossa Pharmaceuticals, and he wrote a paper about the origins of COVID and all that stuff. And he knows there was H7 and 9 in those patients, but he thought it was contamination from vaccines. But he's looking at my material with an open mind, apparently, and we'll find out
That's cool.
what he thinks of that. Yeah, yeah. So he's testifying in front of Congress. McCall is testifying in front of Congress. So they're bringing this up. So for people who are watching, like, oh boy, more conspiracy theory crap. No, 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 no. This gets brought up in Congress as a potential event. So I don't know if do you have the Mike McCall stuff queued up? Can we watch that? That's a congressional testimony.
Your video.
Yeah, so that's in my video. It's congressional testimony. Why don't we take a listen to this with our YouTube audience so people understand this is touchstone stuff, part of the COVID-19 origin story. Mike McCall is the head of like the House Select Committee on Chinese Affairs or something. In fact, we'll look that up in a second to see exactly what he is. But let's listen to Mike McCall in front of Congress.
Before we do that, because this is important, and we will, I want to make sure people understand we're not saying that nothing happened at the Wuhan military games. And in fact, Ezra Levant and Rebel News had very good evidence that many, many Canadian military people became infected. But I didn't hear George Webb say anything about this. This didn't come to light until months later. And this seems like the big story at what was going on at the Wuhan military games, right?
Well, in fact, the story that you just showed us in the paper, so you just showed us an article, and I forget it was the Donnie Sullivan or the other author, but that was published April 28th. I published this video, I published my Wuhan military games video April 20th. April 20th.
Oh, wow.
So so this story came out a week after my video going down this Matcha Benassi lane, and I never even heard of that part of the story until you brought it up one day, and I'm like, what the hell's a Matcha Benassi? Is that a sandwich from Greece? What is that? I didn't even know what it was. I was like, what is a Matcha Benassi?
Is it Greek? Is that name Matcha Greek?
I'd never even heard it. Never ever heard this before. I didn't know what it was. Is it a sauce? I didn't know what it was. Is it like a tzatziki?
I'll have the Matcha Benassi, but not too much pepper.
Yeah, I prefer the tzatziki. So I didn't know what it was, and then you bring it up. I'm like, what? A bicyclist? Where does he come up with this crap? But now, in retrospect, we have the benefit of understanding their techniques, their methods, and they needed to get ahead of this story. Because if in fact the Wuhan military games plays somewhat of a role, we don't know what it is, George showing up in March with some nonsense angle here taints the entire Wuhan military aspect, so that anybody who hears it now is like, oh, that crap with him and the bicycle, that's a horseshit. Come on. But that's not the Wuhan military games story. That's the George Webb nonsense version of this. And there is something going on here because it does come up in Congress. The timing of it is important in the grand scheme of things. So let's look at sort of this baseline, right? What else is happening outside the world of George Webb, particularly in Congress? Let's take a look.
Yeah, okay. So this is your video. Here we go.
Not only the ranking member on the Committee on Foreign Affairs, but also the head of the House's China Task Force, Chairman Mike McCall.
Thank you, Whip Scalise, Ranking Member Comer. As many of you know, I began investigating the origins of COVID-19 in April last year.
Back then, I bought into the narrative, right? And this lab leak story is a counter narrative that everybody was like, lab leak? Come on, it came a wet market. Only
Right,
conspiracy
that soup.
people think it came from a lab leak.
Right.
It came from a wet market. Everybody knows it came from the Wuhan lab market. All right, so if you jump ahead to that next cue point that I shared with you, this is these guys testifying. Now, the point that I'm trying to make here is I put out a video talking about Wuhan, talking about the games, talking about this. You got all kinds of opening ceremony stuff. It looks like the Olympics. There's 100,000 people in the stadium. It is unbelievable. We have over 100 athletes competing there. We send a whole team of people. It's unreal how many athletes we have.
Oh, and they have a whole big opening ceremony. It is a big deal for sure.
So when Mike McCall and these guys go to testify, McCall talks about the military games. So can we jump ahead to that next?
I think this is it. But these cue points
7 minutes. Yep.
difficult.
7 minutes. Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
you got it. You got it. That's it. So November 17th, the first cases were traced back to November 17th. So this is when the first detected stuff. So what was taking place 2 or 3 weeks before that? Anything? 2 to 3 weeks before.
2019, Wuhan hosted the 2019 World Military Games. These are similar to the Olympics, but with military personnel competing.
And what's interesting here is this is taking place coincident with Event 201. So Event 201 is taking place. This is taking place. The Milken Conference is taking place, talking about we got to get off of eggs. We got to get off of eggs. But this is a spectacular super spreader event.
Well, it's also aimed at the military. So if you're trying to fight an enemy,
of them.
make the military sick.
10,000 athletes. Yeah, from every country.
Right.
From like 100 countries, right? So you got 10, look at all these countries. 10,000 athletes come together to sweat on each other and sneeze and cough and wrestle. This is genius. This is brilliant. If you're looking to spread a pathogen, and you're like, well, but China doesn't have a Super Bowl. Oh, yes, they do. Oh, yes, they do. Oh, yes, they do. Uh-huh. Because the Olympics aren't going to be held in China.
Wait a minute.
Oh, yes, they are. In Beijing. Yeah, right.
Do these military games, does it go different countries every year? Like what? It's interesting. I didn't realize that Wikipedia about the 2019 military games, that is the one where it was spread. It's not just giving you a general thing about the Wuhan military games. It's about the 2019. Like why don't they have a general thing that just says, hey, the Wuhan military games 2012?
Because this is the last one. Because they haven't done it since.
Uh-huh.
Now, I think they're planning to do it again now. But because of COVID, they didn't do any of them since then. But this was the 7th one. Now, I don't know if they were doing it every other year, which might mean this has been going on for 14 years, not 7 years.
Doesn't it also seem weird that this is the primary entry on Wikipedia rather than Wuhan military games, and then 2019 is a subheading here? I was just going to say, do a quick search for 2017. Wuhan Military World Games. Just change it to 2017 and see if there's a listing for that. And if we can find out who were the winners for that year. No.
7th.
How about 2012? Military World Games.
Military World Games, 2015.
A multi-sport event organized by the International Military Sports Council. Well, isn't that a weird logo? What does that look like?
Since atomic energy, and since 1995.
Yeah, although so China is only having
Italian, right? Organized by Italian region from March 2010. So it looks like they've held it.
Okay, so the first event was in Rome in 1995. It's every 4 years, and the last one was in Wuhan, and the next one is in Curacao.
But that already was last year. That was
okay.
Fine.
Did they have it?
There we go.
They don't have an article that matches this, so they didn't have it. Interesting, right?
Curacao Military World Games.
Yeah.
That would be it.
Okay. No, it just took us back to this article.
The first one. What was the first one? The first listing.
This is just their general website. It doesn't
Right,
look
but
like they had
it. Doesn't look like it's. They may not have, but it doesn't look like it's a Chinese thing. It looks like it goes, Italy,
International
China,
globalist thing.
So it just so happened that in 2019, this event's in China. China puts on a production the likes of which nobody's ever seen before. I mean, this is bigger than the Olympics, right? This is unbelievable. 100,000 people in the stadium.
Right.
Now, George somehow gets on this story in the March timeframe, apparently, but I can't find any evidence of that. The only evidence I find of him talking about it in March is the reference to him talking about it in March.
Well, because they deleted all of his YouTube channels because he was basically making up nonsense about this woman without any evidence. And so here's another piece of interesting evidence. Like, yes, COVID was a big deal. This woman is in the army, but look at this as like a featured CNN thing, which is interesting because remember what's the date? The date of this is April 27th. So a day before the other thing.
And
pretty interesting.
Week after my video.
Week after your video. And also, just like they did with Imran Awan, they didn't just write this article and take stock photos of this woman. They went to her house and did a whole photo and video shoot. They have this whole entire thing. Well, they're going to see a commercial first, but basically, just like we had, look, here we got this dramatic photo of her looking out the window as she's getting death threats from idiots.
Vermeer, dude, that's a Vermeer shot. Whoever, dude, that's a Vermeer shot through the window.
Saying. This lighting is a very glass. Produced article. Yeah. They didn't just write a thing about it. They wanted this to be a major thing. And there's
why would they
so
do
here's
that
her husband.
My video? Yeah,
here's the husband, Matthew Benassi. We're going to talk about him more during the sponsor exclusive segment. Here they are together, whole photo shoot of them. And then also in this video, which if we play it here, the dopes at CNN here. Okay, so these are the only sections of this video where George did the, oh look, it just says George Webb, March 2020. They don't want to give you the exact date. Maybe it says it in here. Matthew Benassi. Let's look for March in this article. It wasn't until March, months after the first reported coronavirus cases in China, that conspiracy theorists turned their focus to Matcha Benassi. The baseless theory began with her participation in October in the Military World Games. We'll listen to whatever aspect of this phone call between Drunk George and Dopey Donnie once we get to the Patreon section and the sponsor exclusive section of the show. But the upshot of it is Donnie gets him on the phone, explains to George that Matcha Benassi at that time in 2020 had not even contracted COVID, let alone been patient zero. We didn't have vaccines yet because it was March 2020. And George said that he had a source. That's his thing. Anyone calls him and says something, he has a source. He thinks that makes it factual or something that he can just put out there and then like this is his process or something. But the point is, he said the source was some nurse at a hospital where Donnie informs George that Matcha Benassi was never in that hospital, and they checked that hospital. There's no nurse by that name. So George basically has no evidence and is confronted here on the phone with Donnie, making George look like the idiot that he is. And again, it's not yay Donnie for showing George that he's stupid or boo Donnie, we like George. These two dopes are working together, as far as I can tell, because there's like about 1 million people working at CNN. How is it that Donnie is always getting selected to report on idiotic stories from George?
Well, that's what we have to make sure the audience understands, is that Donnie is also the guy who wrote the story about the Charleston hoax thing. So Donnie writes that story about George Webb, and then Donnie is the guy again who comes in to write this story, which has nothing to do with the Port of Charleston or nuclear dirty bombs. This is a completely different twist. So what the hell, Donnie on this again? So once again, Donnie comes to the rescue with the story, and now it because it talks about baseless and conspiracy. You see how the word conspiracy
Yes.
and Wuhan military games are used in the same sentence? The Wuhan military game conspiracy, the Wuhan military game conspiracy theory, right?
Yes, and also these articles that Donnie is writing, George's brother loves them. He's submitted these things in court a million times, and because they're coming from CNN, it's got some degree of credibility with the courts.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing to keep in mind is, George is a moron, and he's been thrown off of Twitter and YouTube and Patreon and everything. But amazingly, he seems to snap back. I'm blocked, so I don't know how many followers George Webb has on Twitter. And they'll say that us even talking about this is jealousy. It's not jealousy, because you see, you have experience in putting out information that very prominent names in the independent news world, Brett Weinstein and other people, are looking at your work and talking about your work. We're not like two idiots who are out here talking about stuff that nobody is interested in. There are people who have seen the stuff that we're doing. Each of us have had, stories and tweets and things, little elements that have gone viral into the millions.
Lara Logan jumped all over the Anton Dilger thing. She was
Really?
like, what? Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't know that.
And she retweeted that. Yeah, she retweeted the Anton Dilger twist. She was stunned by that. She's like,
So I'm
what
saying
the-
people see what we're doing, and we're not over here talking about esoteric stuff that has nothing to do with anything. But yet, you and I can't get past 20 or 30,000. This guy shoots up to 70, 100,000. Doesn't seem realistic. Another thing, as I was going back through details for this episode, there's another person that we need to talk about, and she might not like hearing her name stated right here, but this is somebody who I believe attempted to deceive me, Corrine Stoughton. We're going to talk about her because she played a major role in assisting Donnie in getting this story written. I do believe, according to her, she was the one who basically, I think, found the Benassis. She's not mentioned in any of this stuff, but this is a person who just began contacting me out of the blue. And I was quite apprehensive to speak with her at first because didn't really trust her. And then she told me that she has been romantically involved with George, had some kind of weird telephone relationship with his brother. I even have a voicemail that was shared with me by this woman. You know what? We're going to play it during the sponsor exclusive segment, because when you leave a voicemail for a person and record it on their phone, once you utter those words and they record it, it becomes their intellectual property. You don't have any control over that information anymore. And when that person voluntarily sends it to me, I haven't signed any kind of confidentiality agreement. The contents of this message are now my property. So I'm going to play them for everybody. George's brother is going to get insanely pissed off, but I want the audience to gauge if they think that George's brother is being authentic in this message, or if this is something that was sent to me with the specific intent of it being released so that George's brother could concoct a cause of action to try to sue me. And he might have thought that I feared that to some extent at the time that they were doing all of this, but now we're going to play it because I understand the legality of handling this information, whether it's real or false. And I don't trust this woman, Corrine Stoughton, at all. Her father was allegedly, people may have heard George or David speak about deep NSA. And that's who this person is, deep NSA. And my understanding is she got that name because allegedly, according to George or his brother or whoever, her father worked for the NSA. Now, I don't know if that's true. This is his LinkedIn here. It just says that he's a software architect. I think he's retired. He looks to be, this is somebody's dad. So I think he's retired, but he was a software architect for Ericsson. Advanced Computer Communications. I don't know. It doesn't say anything here about working at the NSA, but it does say U.S. Department of Defense. So maybe he's not going to advertise that he was working at the NSA. I don't have any evidence that he has or hasn't. Maybe he has. He is telling us He's doing stuff with major agencies and divisions within the Department of Defense. So, okay, again, I'm not trying to defend this person. Probably he has worked at the NSA if he's telling us DOD. And what does that mean his daughter is doing? We've been exploring these familial connections in the intelligence world. And I'm sure this is a person you haven't heard about or thought about, right?
I've never heard of her. You know, I think that the idea that George Webb was getting on the Wuhan military games as early as March. Remember, in March, when the president declares a national emergency, there's not 10 dead in New York. There's not 10 dead in Florida. There's not 10 dead in Texas.
Right. How is George all over it?
How's he already back in Wuhan back in October 2019?
Was he there? No, he wasn't reporting it in October. He started talking about it in March.
In March. But the point is, in March, there's not that many people dead in March. Like, we're just starting the lockdowns, 2 weeks to slow the spread, and he's bringing up the Wuhan military games in 2019. This was so far before the wet market conversation.
Yeah.
And to
this is the early days and weeks of everything. There's another important thing that's happening in this moment, John. Remember, I'd like to know exactly when he did that, but all the reporting on that is happening in April. So maybe that's toward the end of March. I don't know. But what was happening in the middle of March? March 13th, I start walking around New York City, and I'm one of the only people who's even leaving his home in a city of 8 or 9 million. And I'm going out every day saying, hey, wait a minute, the hospitals don't look busy. All the ambulances are here. Here's doctors hanging outside smoking cigarettes. They might have, and Crowdsource the Truth is exploding. Lots and lots of people were signing up for subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, Patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, Odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth. You're calling me. Hawkins is calling me. Whoever else we had as co-hosts at that time was calling saying, hey, are you getting like a really large increase in paying subscribers? And I said, yes, it's amazing, isn't it? Everybody's at home. Everybody wants news about this. And we're going around. And that's also the time where you said to me, hey, what are you doing going out? We got to, and I said, nah, this is nonsense. And then you dug in. Is this George attempting to counteract our reporting?
It's very interesting you bring this up, because it's also when someone from Switzerland reached out to me and said, hey, would you like to talk to Laura Ingraham? So I'm afraid they were trying to do a catch and kill. They were trying to steal this narrative. We were already, and just the fact that somebody mentioned it, George's version of the story got blown out of the water. So we're going to go deeper with our patrons in just a handful of minutes here. I can't thank you guys for enough for watching here on YouTube. If you're not yet patrons, please join us over at odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, or you can go to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth/. And we'll be right back in 5 minutes. This has been Web of Deception, number 24, Wuhan Military Games. I'm John Cullen. Thanks for joining.
What you know about rolling down in the deep? When your brain goes numb, you can call a mental freeze. When these people talk too much, put that shit in slow motion. Yeah, I feel like an astronaut in the ocean. Yeah. What you know about rolling down in the deep? When your brain goes numb, you can call a mental freeze. When these people talk too much, put that shit in slow motion. Yeah, I feel like an astronaut in the ocean. She says that I'm cool. I'm like, yeah, that's true. I believe in G.O.D. Don't believe in P.H.O.D. She keep playing me down. I'ma play her for fun. You don't really know my mental. Let me give you the picture like stencil. Falling down in the drought. No flow rain was pouring down. See that pain was all around. See my mom was kinda loud. Didn't know which way to turn. Flow was cool, but I still felt burned. Energy up, you can feel my surge. I'ma kill everything like this bird. What you know about rolling astronaut.